Hello, Brett. Welcome back for part two of the New Zealand Tech podcast. That one's a bit of a turn up for the books after, I don't know what we're at, 580 episodes. We I think this is the first one that's been interrupted by a false alarm on the building burning down.
I'm pleased to see you survived. That's good.
Yeah, thanks. Right, so we were about to sort of delve into sort of this situation where an internal communication from Musk to his people at Tesla, basically saying, "Look, get back to the office for at least 40 hours a week, or get stuffed, unless you're one of a chosen select few." And yeah, I guess this sort of crosses over with discussions that I've been having recently with a range of folks who have been talking about just the value of getting people back together in person, but how at odds it seems to be with most of certainly the technology world, where we're not expecting to have staff back in the office for 40 hours a week, that we're expecting a level of flexibility now. And trying to get my head around this, I thought, well, I guess if you're a manager of a manufacturing team, which is a pretty big part of what Tesla do, then yeah, sitting at the end of a computer while your manufacturing staff are running around a factory, I can see that probably not necessarily playing out so well if you're at the top of the stack and you're expecting to, um, you know, direct people from afar. That was the bit that I could understand, but I don't really know the full story on this one. What are your thoughts? Do you think they're going to make this work, or could they be losing a lot of people at Tesla?
Look, I don't know. I think the world's turned, right. A lot's changed over the last couple of years, and I think COVID had played a very big part in that as a fast forward mechanism. I think we've always been heading towards a world where potentially at some stage a lot of people start to question why they hop in a car and spend an hour and a half in each direction, morning and night, going to a cubicle farm somewhere to do something that they could quite happily do in their back bedroom or on the dining room table, right? So I can absolutely see for companies like Tesla, where it is a manufacturing facility, right? Or manufacturing company, it's pretty hard to, geez, I don't know, make batteries on your dining room table, or assemble electric motors on your dining room table. You need to be at a place, and that's a pretty standard model of work. It will be interesting to see for those people at Tesla who don't necessarily have to be at work, knowledge workers, for example, how they take to that. Elon Musk does not have a particularly good track record when it comes to caring and feeding for his staff. He's got all sorts of interesting health and safety issues going on at one of the plants, I think in California, isn't it? They've got issues with rampant racism in some places and other things. So I'm not sure that he's someone that builds the most incredible work cultures, but he has an amazing knack of hiring incredible people, and I don't think there's any doubt about that, to drive those businesses for him. So, look, I think the Tesla culture is clearly one of good old working more than 40 hours a week and all that sort of thing. I'm sure a lot of people will thrive with that, but I think a lot of companies that might want to follow suit might want to just sit down and have a very careful think before doing so. I think if you're early on in your career, it makes sense to be in the office. Those that are seen will be known and understood and promoted. I think that's a fairly safe bet. I know a lot of people that would happily never go near an office again, which I think is interesting, which is not to say they don't like getting in front of customers and making sales calls and doing all those other things. They just don't see any point in sitting in an office anymore. I think it's probably changed the face of international and domestic air travel. I think that's a fairly safe bet as well. It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. There's a really good guy on Twitter, Chris Hurd. His Twitter handle is Chris_Hurd, HERD, who's a bit of a guru on the whole, remote work, I guess, thing, and has a startup company based around it, providing hardware for people that are remote workers. But he tweets some very interesting stuff and some quite interesting kind of surveys that he's done and some of the results are quite fascinating. In some parts of the world, huge numbers, 80% of people have no intention of ever returning to the office. Obviously, it'll all depend how what looks to be a recession plays out. But we are in the tech world in an absolute war for a battle for talent. And I think those companies that might want to demand people spend their 37.5 or 40 hours or whatever it is in a building downtown might struggle. That would be my guess. So I think, I don't know. I think for some organizations this is going to work, particularly if you have to go and work at a machine like the people in the Tesla factories do. I think for those people whose main tool of trade is a laptop, it's probably quite different.
Yes, I think it's going to be a time, particularly the next 6 to 12 months of navigating what works, and it's probably going to vary a lot from one organisation to another. And there are a lot of factors. Of course, we've got organisations that have been around for many years that have been entirely remote workforce,
Yep.
and then you've got situations like this, and we've seen it with Apple and others where there's a push to come back to the office, although not to this sort of extreme where it's full time in the office, quite as much with these bigger tech players. So I'll be watching this one with interest, and there's so many facets you could sort of go into in terms of the benefits of being together face to face, the things that the way communication works when you see people, when you're with folks face to face. Then we've got these variations on remote work where some folks just want to work remotely, but they also don't want to turn the camera on. And there's a level of sort of nuance there that you lose in a communication if you can't see the expressions and the body language that goes with it. So it's a bit of a journey. And then there's some organizations that are kind of demanding, if you're working remotely, you must be seen all the time. I guess my approach with my team is to say, look, let's consider those other communication aspects of being able to see those expressions and see me waving my arms around or whatever it is, and see how you respond and whether you're laughing or not, rather than just an emoji. But I think that there's room for lots of different scenarios. And look, if you're at the real pointy end of innovation, working in the auto industry space and some other areas, then maybe the way that plays out is that you or certainly for certain roles that a bunch of people have to be there in person to get the right sort of pace and to get the right sort of results. But I don't know for sure.
I think creativity and innovation thrives in an environment where you get people together. Having said that, I've over the last couple of years been involved in all sorts of interesting conversations, online conversations where we've used a tool like Miro, for example, and got some really, really good work done. And in fact, sometimes in a more structured manner than we might if everyone had been in a room sticking Post-it notes on the wall, right? So I think part of it is a discipline piece, using the tools properly, the discipline part of it. There's absolutely a cultural piece in there, setting what is expected and what's not. But there's all sorts of interesting phenomena cropping up out of this. I've read two quite what appear to be very real stories of people. One was in the US, I'm not sure where the other one was, software developers who have gone and got themselves a second full-time job. And are earning an absolute fortune working for two companies simultaneously, because neither employment contract mentioned that they can only work for one company. So they're not breaking any rules. They're putting the hours in and doing all the work. They're obviously doing it all remotely, and earning good money as a direct result, right? So there's an interesting question. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It's probably just a thing. But so I think Yeah, I think a lot of there is absolutely a synergy and an energy that comes from getting people in a room. That's just a given. But by the same measure, I think a lot of that classic thing of couldn't have this meeting been an email. I think that's always been an issue within business, and I think people have gotten a lot better over the last couple of years at running online meetings in a structured manner. We use at Callaghan Innovation, we use Google Meet, and we'll often just have a quick chat with someone back and forth. They'll flick you a link to a video call. You'll jump on the video call, sort the thing out in 10 minutes, jump off the call again, and then someone else will do the same thing. And I spend probably at times half of my day on video calls with people back and forth. And it works. It actually works really, really well. But we're not standing beside large metal presses making electric cars, so it's a different environment, right? But
Yeah.
but I think certainly in the tech sector, particularly in the software development field, where you can work from a mountain in Tibet if you want, it would companies really need to think through whether they want to force that kind of stuff on people that don't want to do it. Is it better to have a hugely talented software developer who refuses to come into an office working from home all the time, or would you rather that you implement everyone must be in the office and they choose to leave, right? So I think there's a lot of it's important to make good decisions in that sort of situation. A lot of trade-offs, right?
Yeah, and there's that whole aspect of whatever you want to call it, deep work, and having your own space where you can just think and work, whether it's coding or other areas where spending a good chunk of time remote and away from other people can really help facilitate that. Now,
well, the other thing, so just on that, the other thing that's interesting in the space, right, is that so much of our thinking about work comes from the Industrial Revolution, right? I have to stand beside a loom to make X meters of fabric a day. If I need twice as many meters of fabric, I either need 2 looms, or I need 2 people to stand next to looms, or whatever it might be. So much of it is archaic, antiquated thinking, but we keep dragging it. Been dragging it now for a couple of 100 years, I guess, or 150 years. It probably is time for a rethink around some of that stuff. What constitutes work? But we are still very firmly wedded to this whole idea of a certain number of hours per week for a certain value output, right? And I think a lot of those connections between those two things are breaking and have been broken a bit more quickly due to COVID. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, and we will see this continue to evolve. Space. There is just so much going on as far as space at the moment. Blue Origin just had their, I think it was 5th tourist trip up to the edge of space. This is a company, Jeff Bezos' company, that's been, I guess, working towards space tourism for a long time, but now that it's started, it seems to be really, it's ramped up, fairly quickly. And I know that Blue Origin have very much sort of tried to compete with SpaceX and haven't always come off so well. But we are moving into a time where it's become so much easier, and of course, SpaceX and Blue Origin, and others such as Rocket Lab have put in a lot of energy to get to the place we're at now. But it seems as though things are really speeding up quite quickly. China has been in the news the last few days, putting another a rocket up in terms of their work for building their new space station. Tiangong, or Heavenly Palace, as it's known.
It's quite catchy. I like that.
Yeah, kind of cool. And look, it looks like a pretty impressive space station that they've got coming together. Who knows what will happen to the ISS, the International Space Station, with current things going on between Russia and I guess the rest of the planet. It's still the US that's putting in the biggest amount of money into space. But it's just fascinating seeing all of these things going on, and last looking back a year ago, there wasn't. Space tourism was at the extremities. There were a few folks that would go up on get a ride from the Russians at great expense, but now those prices are really coming down, and the things that I guess have been talked about for so many decades are now kind of on this technology innovation curve that we all know about. Starts out
Yep.
expensive, and then the prices come down, and it gets more and more accessible to a broader range of people. And I find it to be incredible, the pace that things are now moving about. And obviously we talked about satellites and so on earlier on in the show, but I don't know. Have you got any views on where we're going to be in a decade or two, now that we've got this pace going, that it's not going to slow down, is it?
No, look, so no, it's not. I think there's a few interesting things going on in here. Watching, Musk, Peter Beck, Branson, Bezos compete in this space is quite fascinating. So it's the amount of innovation that's going on in this domain is absolutely massive. It is a contest of egos, without a doubt, certainly between three of those. I'm not sure what Peter Beck is like, but the others in there are certainly not known for having minor league egos. Is it about rocket-based international travel? I've seen articles about that over the years about, it really doesn't make too much financial sense, I suspect, to just send people up for an hour or two into space for doing a couple of orbits and a bit of weightlessness and all that sort of thing. Obviously, there's some people can afford that. 99.999% of the population can't. But the idea of international travel via rocket is very interesting. And I'm sure that underpins some of what's going on in this space, right? Without a doubt. But you're right. If you look at what's happened 10 years ago, this was just science fiction, absolute science fiction. And now, if you've got a big enough checkbook, you can write a check and go to space. So that's happened in an incredibly short period of time. 10 years out, I have no idea where we'll be at, other than the rockets will be more reliable. Probably just as polluting, I'm not sure. And maybe there will be people traveling around the world, vast distances and incredibly quick periods of time. Of course, this all is predicated on the fact that none of them crash and burn. What's that Elon Musk quote about? He wants to die on Mars, just not on landing or not on re-entry or whatever it is. So that might set things back. But what you're looking at here is effectively the same journey of from the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk through to the 747 kind of thing. Was how many years was that? 50, 60 years? It wasn't that long. We're building things faster, better. We have new manufacturing techniques now. Where are we going to be 10 years down the track? God, I'd hate to think, or I'd love to think it will be quite incredible, without a doubt. I remain to be convinced we should all be heading to Mars, but
I'm probably with you on that. But it seems like China are lining up, heading to the, sending people to the moon. Mars is certainly on their plans. Musk is sort of still talking that Mars could be, as soon as 2025 from a SpaceX perspective. But there is something glorious, and I don't know if you saw the videos of the latest Blue Origin mission, but it does look pretty spectacular. Seeing the rocket come down again, and then also seeing the rest of it, the stage with the passengers in it, come down to earth.
Capsule,
on its
the biggest
parachute sort of thing, and amid some dust.
The biggest problem Blue Origin have is clearly what their rocket looks like, right? I think You know, whoever was the designer that convinced Bezos that we should make this rocket and it needs to look like a giant penis, mate, I think was absolute evil genius. That was some great piece of work.
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious, isn't it?
It is. It is.
There were a couple of more things I was hoping to speak about, but I think we've run out of time. We'll come back to them. Want to delve into Vocus and 2 Degree merger having, I guess we could say it's fully completed now because the Vocus team have been moved into 2 Degrees headquarters and had a chance to hear from them on that last week. So we'll look forward to delving in a bit more. What does this actually mean for New Zealand telecommunications? But it had a great chat with, there was a bunch of media and folks hearing from Mark Callender, who has, moved across from heading up Vocus to heading up the new combined entity of 2 Degrees. So we'll look to plan something in the weeks ahead on that one. I think the probably the big or one of the headline pieces of news there was that they will be changing from being a whole raft of sort of challenger brands to being a combined brand overall. So we'll be seeing the end of Orcon and Slingshot and so on. And it will all be 2 Degrees. I think 2 Talk was the probably one of, if not the only brand that's maybe gonna stay separate from that. But yeah, quite a big point in New Zealand's telecommunication history.
It is. It's a very big deal. Very, not just numerically, but from a shaking up the marketplace perspective. And 2 Degrees, I don't know a lot about Vocus, but I know 2 Degrees have played that challenger role extremely well in the past, right? So
yeah,
no, how it all plays out.
You're right. Yeah, no, look, I think both entities have have done very well in in their own ways. The interesting thing will be to see whether they manage to sort of carve out more of the business market. And certainly from a mobile perspective, 2 Degrees hasn't tended to be a big player. But now when you look at some of the data and so on, it seems like they've got I think they talk about a 98.5% of the population being covered by their network. Doesn't really sound too much different to the others. So. Fascinating things ahead. Now, we also didn't get time to delve into all of Apple's news from this morning, of which there is an absolute load online. I just feel encouraged that Apple continuing to compete and innovate. There's some really, really cool, mostly little things, but that's what technology innovation is about in most cases, isn't it? Is that continuous improvement and not staying the same. Very interesting to see that footage of Apple CarPlay sort of taking over all the screens in new vehicles, apparently from late next year. And if we look at the new electric vehicles that are coming out, they look pretty slick with all of the digital displays, and I can imagine that there'll be a few folks at Apple sort of salivating over this idea that what's going to be on those screens in the latest electric vehicals will be all Apple.
I think the electric vehicles will be Apple at some point, right? I mean, I think that's pretty. Yeah. That's definitely. I was listening to a podcast here, Professor Scott Galloway.
Yes.
Talking a while back, and his take on it was that it's all about FaceTime screen time. That's where the these massive company valuations come from, whether it's Facebook or whoever. And Apple can't afford not to be in that market, and so I'm sure they will invade the screens of other manufacturers. But I'd be very surprised we don't see at some point Apple producing their own vehicles. The other thing I think that might not have come out at the Apple event this year, but will next year, is around their augmented reality investments. They've got a ton of patents in that space. They've hired a bunch of what appear to be incredibly talented people. This is a company that knows how to build consumer electronics, right? It's probably the best company on the planet at innovating and building this stuff. I'm really looking forward to see what they do. If there's someone that can really shake that market up, Microsoft are doing some pretty clever stuff. I think the Meta thing is still a work in progress. But yeah, watching what Apple bring to bear in this market, I think is going to be really interesting. Robert Scoble, just as an aside, is doing some quite interesting analysis of some of this stuff. So
yeah, been on some chats with him, and yeah, I think he certainly seems to be in the camp that's sort of salivating over.
Yeah, he's definitely a fanboy
over what's coming in those regards.
Yeah.
But we know that Apple will often sort of sit back until they've got something that really works, and if maybe they don't find something that really delivers, then that maybe they won't actually end up releasing something. But it seems as though there's some room there. There's a bit of a gap, but yeah, it is. I guess this whole sort of virtual reality area is like others in that yeah, we don't seem to have quite landed in terms of how the technology becomes relevant to a really big mass market.
Look, I think the challenge at the moment is no one wants to look like a dick wearing a tissue box on their face. Right? I mean, that is a challenge, and at the moment, that's the only form factor they can squeeze the screens and the lenses and the tracking mechanisms and all the other stuff into. I'm sure at some stage, someone, potentially Apple, will figure out how to do that stuff smaller. But I just do not foresee a world where we'll, great for gaming and some other things like that, but a lot of that stuff is still a problem looking for a solution looking for a problem. And until they figure out the form factor, I can't see that moving ahead, breaking into the mainstream. I think that's a real challenge. Look, even you walk into Noel Leemings and places like that, and people are trying them on, and you can tell they're embarrassed there. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff happening, without a doubt.
Yep. Yeah, no, there is, and number of new things coming through when it comes to virtual reality and glasses. I think I saw something about the Amazon. Amazon have got their Alexa type of glasses as well. So there's a lot going on, but nothing that really seems to hit the mark. So probably one of those things that's on a slow burn.
Yeah, I think it'll be a slow. And you were talking earlier, and I think you made a really good point. A lot of this innovation stuff is slow burn. It's just consistent, innovating. Kind of just it's a process of innovation with the occasional oh my god kind of moments, right? And the launch of the iPhone was one of those moments, right, where everyone just sat up and went, wow. So if anybody can pull a rabbit out of this particular hat, it's definitely Apple. But yeah, it'll be interesting just to see what they need to do and what the form factor is going to be, etc., to make it compelling for people, right?
Yep, I think it's an exciting time, even though we're maybe not. It doesn't feel like we're at those sort of steep innovation curves we've maybe have had at other points. So I think it is worth watching closely all the little bits and pieces that are going on that actually add up to some pretty big things over a reasonably short space of time. So well worth having a look at the some of the Apple news, particularly if if you're deep in the Apple ecosystem, and just some of the nice things that they're baking in there looks great. So it might not be earth shattering, but bring it all together, and their ecosystem is just getting slowly but surely richer and richer, and I can imagine their share price is probably going to be at a fairly extreme scale in the next 5 or 10 years, if they can just keep doing the same sort of stuff as they're doing, but bringing in a few of those big hits, like we talked about. Maybe it's the vehicles and
they're making their own silicon now, right? And I think that's a big deal, right? So they're manufacturing their own chips now, and I think Tim Cook, it's a genius company full of geniuses doing genius things, right? And maybe the first iterations of things might not hit the mark, but they've got probably the deepest R&D pockets on the planet, or certainly some of the deepest. They'll nail it without a doubt. If anyone can, they will. And I think the fact that they are building their own silicon now is very, very interesting. I think all of a sudden it heads them in a direction that they have a lot more control, and gives them that opportunity to potentially pull a rabbit out of the hat that scares the proverbial out of their competitors. So
yeah. Well, it was only a short number of years ago that we'd be talking about Apple and just how poorly they were treating their Mac users, and in particular, it'd be years between releases of certain Macs. It was a Mac Mini or Mac Pro and so on, and you were really getting ill-treated in many ways if you were a professional organization buying Macs, because they would release a product and then maybe not replace it for 5 or 6 years, and in the interim the price didn't come down to reflect the fact that it was out of step with the rest of the industry. Generally the price would stay the same or maybe only move a little bit, but now, as you say, with producing their own chips, their own silicon, we're now suddenly in this point where they're innovating at pace, with certainly a fairly broad spectrum of Macs. So I'm kind of curious how that will play out, and the integration now that they're getting across the the various parts of that ecosystem. One of the things they announced today was that you can now use your iPhone, which has, immensely better cameras than any webcam that that exists, right? In general, unless you're talking about a high-end video conferencing system, and even there, it'd be open to debate with the sort of
exactly
by the time you add in their silicon, and the fact that basically now you can start, you can mount that iPhone with its superb cameras and make that your webcam. It's just another small innovation, but actually puts them in a very, very nice position, or certainly puts their users in a nice position for folks that want that higher end result for broadcast and other sorts of things. All right. Well, thank you, Brett. It's been great to catch up. Sorry about the little interruption there with.
I'm pleased you made it, mate.
The building, fortunately, not being on fire. Hopefully, that's
always a good thing.
One off for the show. Go well.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me. Always fun. If people want to find me, I'm Brett Roberts on Twitter. Find me on LinkedIn. And thanks again, Paul. Love these chats. I do.
Excellent. Thanks, Brett. And folks, definitely go and seek out Brett. Follow him on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and to keep up with what he's doing. And you can, of course, find myself, Paul Spain, and NZ Tech Podcast across most of the social channels. And these episodes, which we know they're mostly listened to through the main podcast apps or any podcast app. But you can also find live streams as we've streamed today across Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, I believe. So if you want to catch the news a little bit quicker, feel free to follow us on those channels and to join us live. All right. Thanks very much. Thanks, Brett. Good. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. We'll catch you again next week. See ya.
See you later. Bye-bye.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.